What's up, everybody? Ask Coach Ben podcast. We're doing a special episode to recap NoGi Worlds and Quintet, and I'm here with Jim from Jiu-Jitsu Magazine. How's it going, Jim?
It's going well. Thanks for opening doors and getting another episode in the books. And as you just stated, we're gonna go ahead and not necessarily recap the particular matches, but we want to talk about the overview of this year's IBJJF NoGi Worlds event, and then we just kind of want to delve into the topic of these more hybrid events that have been coming out, and most recently the Quintet one. It was on his fourth, fifth show, whatever it is.
Yeah,
but
it might be more than that too.
Yeah, still relatively new.
Yeah.
So what would you see at the NoGi Worlds this year?
Well, first, so just like you said, Jim, we're gonna recap the NoGi Worlds and Quintet and kind of see like a parallel and similarities and differences. The main thing with the NoGi Worlds that was started on Thursday of last week and went through Sunday. Sunday was when they had the absolute finals and the finals of all the weight divisions. And really, what I noticed with the IBJJF and where they're headed and the points-based tournaments, where they're all headed is, to me, they're headed towards the Olympics. They're trying to be governed by the Olympics, make it to the Olympics, and they're running a show that is not the most spectator-friendly, but it is athlete-friendly. You know, anybody can sign up and compete. Everything just seems very hard to watch, to be honest, unless you're like just a huge fan of the sport or you're involved with the athletes that are competing. It's just the same as wrestling or judo in the Olympics, right? Like, do you really watch every single match in the Olympics for wrestling or judo? No, right? You watch certain matches and whatnot, but for the most part, they don't even really tell you who is competing when, right? It's just a tournament bracket. This is the time, and I'll be honest. It was hard to watch, and some of the matches aren't the most exciting. That's mainly due to the rule set, but they're just headed towards that right, the Olympics. They're trying to regulate it. They have DQs, right off the bat, no nonsense stuff. One thing that stood out to me immediately was Devontae Johnson. So he got so what happened was he was in a fight with Jackson Souza, and Jackson Souza may have hit him with a club towards the end of the mat, and they reset, and Devontae pushed him, right? And that just, that kind of push is a big no-no in IBJJF. So they immediately DQ'd him, and then they actually DQ'd him from not just that match, but from the absolute also. He forfeited his opportunity to win. And that's very different from these super fight shows, right? Like Kasai and these things. We witnessed not long ago, Wagner Hocha kicked AJ in the back, and they restarted that match. Tex Johnson gave a right hook to a guy, and they just restarted the match. There's a difference between points-based tournaments, IBJJF, and like a show, right? Like a super fight show, or a show in which the athletes are highlighted or they're showcased, right? So that was one big difference to me. They're just no nonsense, right? So that again, it's the Olympics. That's where they're headed. They're not very spectator friendly. So I tried to watch the entire day Sunday. I wanted to watch the NoGi Worlds, right? And just the way kind of the progression of the matches, you don't really know who's up. It's very hard to kind of follow. And if you're not a big fan of the sport, and I'm a big fan of the sport, if you're not a big fan of the sport, it's really tough to follow along, and it's very, very long as well. It's the whole thing. I mean, if you started watching at 9 a.m., it was over at like 5 or 6 p.m., so that's a long day. Right, so very hard to watch if you're a spectator, right? Do you have a whole day to spend watching jiu-jitsu? And a lot of the competitors are not that well known, right? So yeah, that was just a general outlook of these things. And I see a very clear separation between the points-based tournaments and then the
showcase
shows,
events,
like the Fight to Wins, like the Kasai's, Polaris, EBI, these types. There's a clear separation happening. You'll notice right away, just looking at the roster of the NoGi Worlds, that a lot of the big names in NoGi weren't there. I would say the highest level people weren't in the tournament, and that's no disrespect to the people competing. They were very, very high level, but I mean, none of the ADCC champs were in the brackets.
Right, and I think this kind of points to the direction of what you're about to get into. It's the entire landscape changing. Now you do have these names, and again, no disrespect to the competitors that just competed. Not that they aren't the top level guys at this time. They're just maybe not the marquee guys, the well-known guys.
Yeah.
And there's this kind of transition happening of people who are known versus people who are not known.
Right.
And that's based off, whether it's based off a skill or whatever X factor there is, it's just the landscape is changing into the participation of these events.
It's nobody's fault, all the guys. That's why I really have to respect the guys that maybe were in ADCC and they chose to go out and compete, because there's no money on the line. So I have this is not a complete list, but this is kind of some of the people that I noticed were in the NoGi Worlds that were also at ADCC. Dante Leon, Adam Wardzinski, Paulo was in ADCC. Vinicius Gazzola, Cyborg, James Popolo, Victor Hugo. It's a long list. Tex Johnson, Jackson Souza. It is a lot of guys, but it's not the marquee guys, even though these are probably the highest level guys of the NoGi Worlds. There just seem to be less of the ultra high level guys in this type of tournament. And I think the reason is because there's no money, right? There's no money. What do you have to gain to do this? And also the timing, right? That it's next to Christmas, right after ADCC. It's in the same venue even. It's in the exact same venue. It's Anaheim Convention Center. That's exactly where ADCC was, So, and then also I can't forget about the women. Jessica Flowers, Jenna Bishop. These were all women that were in ADCC that also chose to compete at NoGi Worlds. Big props to them. There's nothing on the line except just testing yourself and maybe making a name for yourself. But these guys already have a name for themselves, right? They could get super fights probably next month or next week if they wanted. So, like you said, Jim, we're not going to recap every single match. It would be very difficult. And even some of the finals matches, right? There's just not that many things to talk about. The guys that were expected to win, for the most part, did. Joao closed out with his teammate Hiago, Taliesin Suarez, Little Meow won the Rooster. These are guys that are expected to win one. Dante Leon, Adam Wardzinski, Vinicius, they won. Cyborg won his division. I would say one match that if you're going to take something from the NoGi Worlds, one match that was very, very eye-opening to me, and it's kind of signals the new generation or the new style of jiu-jitsu that's going to come in, is Victor Hugo against Cyborg in the absolute. So I showed you the knee bar, right? So Victor Hugo fought Cyborg in the weight class and lost because he just wasn't able to play his game. Cyborg did a brilliant move and pulled guard. Cyborg beat him in the weight class. In the absolute, they faced each other again, and Victor went to his A game, which was pulling guard, playing guard. And this is something that I had. If you're a student of mine, from like many years ago, I suspected this was going to happen soon because of the leg locks coming into jiu-jitsu. I suspected that, especially at brown and black belt, and especially in NoGi, you're going to see a lot of inverting knee bars. So the shotgun knee bar, just inverting into the 50-50 position knee bar, outside Ashi position knee bar, was going to be very popular. I didn't really see it that much. I know Kynan does it a lot, but Victor Hugo is another guy who, if he gets under you and he puts that clamp on your leg and he starts hipping in, he's going to knee bar you. He's going to break your leg. So he got to a position that I would say Cyborg is probably not that used to, which was kind of like the calf slicer position, and then he just pulled the leg through and locked up that shotgun knee bar. And I think Cyborg had a pretty serious injury with his knee. It looked bad, like he was down for a while. And that, that style of jiu-jitsu, that big man inverting style, that's actually Cyborg's style. But Cyborg just didn't really have the leg lock knowledge, I think, to deal with that. He tried to free his knee, didn't do a great job of separating the feet. Like right when you get caught in any leg attack, you should be thinking about separating the feet. Cyborg tried to pull his knee out, and at a certain point, it was just too late. There was no way, and he got caught. Big performance from Victor Hugo. That was a big one. I would say he's the guy of this entire NoGi Worlds that stood out to me. The women's side, there's just not that many competitors. The women's side is really just one or two matches to gold, and there was a couple closeouts. So Jessica Flowers won the open weight. There was just a lot of competitors missing in those women's divisions, especially, and definitely in the men's divisions. Like you didn't see Buchecha, you didn't see Gordon.
Essentially, all the guys who were in the finals or were making noise in the ADCC.
Yeah, I think they're just done at this point. They probably put in such a big camp. Josh Hinger, these guys, right. They put in such a big camp for ADCC that you can't really just go and change the rule set, right?
Well, and recently, so we're talking about events, and then we'll just kind of sidebar for a second. You had the Third Coast Grappling, which Gordon just got done competing in that against Bo Nichols.
Yeah, I mean, he actually just did the Quintet too, which we'll talk about after this.
Right.
But yeah, so the rule sets are all different, and I'm sure he's getting paid for these events. NoGi Worlds is like it's a showcase of your talent, but there's no money on the line, so it's actually a pretty risky thing to do. You can get caught.
Again, the evolving landscape, because the IBJJF used to be, I mean, it still is. It's the most credible. It's the pinnacle of any kind of title, but not the case anymore.
Yeah, it's getting. And another thing with the IBJJF, another reason why a lot of these guys couldn't, this we should have probably brought this up first, is there's a points system, so you can't just sign up anymore. So it actually blocked a lot of people from signing up. You can't sign up for the adult worlds as a black belt without accruing enough points.
Right.
You have to sign up for Masters division. And if you're not a master, like you're not 30 years of age or greater, then you can't even sign up for anything. You cannot compete. So that's a barrier of entry I think the IBJJF needs to think about, because I know a lot of competitors that maybe wanted to compete, couldn't. They never did an IBJJF event because they were maybe preparing for ADCC all year, and then they can't register because they don't have enough points. So anyway, that's where I really see the separation now, is you're going to be this guy or you're going to be this guy, or you're going to try to do both. You're going to try to do this circuit and the super fight circuit and the show circuit, and you're going to, it's going to be rough, but that's what I see coming. There's a separation. Also, can't forget about the Masters division. One thing that I notice every year with these IBJJF tournaments and these types of tournaments is the Masters division gets more and more stacked every year. So as people get older, as people age, you'll see like Ronnie Yaya, Barrett Yoshida. These guys are all in the Masters division, and so I looked at my division for Master 1, right, and I was like, man, these guys. I remember these guys in the adult division and winning. Now they're in the Masters division, so the level of competition is just going to go up in the Masters division as well. So last thing about the NoGi Worlds would be just the way the game has changed. So the first wrestling is way more important than it was before, the way I see it. And this is not new news, right? This is old news, right? Like I'd say 2 years ago, I had already suspected that wrestling would be a huge part of ADCC for the next ADCC, because what I saw at this was 4 years ago, 2015 ADCC was when I was like, wrestling is going to become a huge part of ADCC. And it did. 2017, 2019, wrestling was everything. And then even before then, I remember Andre Galvao talking about how every no-gi sweep is basically a scramble for a single leg or a scramble for a body lock to the back or something. And he's right. Every single sweep that I saw in the no-gi worlds was either ended with wrestling scramble or you just run out of bounds. So you have to have wrestling in order to compete no-gi in the future, I think. I think there's a certain point where if you neglect wrestling, you're going to lose. There's going to be a huge hole that people will be able to exploit, and they can essentially stall you out from the bottom and win by like an advantage if you cannot wrestle, right? Imagine if you sweep me, right? But all I have to do is make sure my butt, shoulders, hips don't hit the ground flat, and I can technical stand up, heist up, frame you away, and just get up, or even run out of bounds, make it look like I'm not running out of bounds, but fall out of bounds, then you get nothing. At most, you get an advantage. There are times where you will get two if it's very obvious that I'm running out of bounds. So wrestling, single legs, and scrambles, I think if you're not working on them and you're training no-gi and you want to compete, you're going to have to make it a part of your game.
Yeah, because those are all traits of wrestling, a wrestling-based game. And, something else that you touched on before we started recording, you're talking about the rule change that took place roughly 3 years ago about double guard pulling.
Yeah.
And then, the opponent that gets up first. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so double guard pulling, IBJJF anyway, is a rule where they changed it. I don't even know if it's 3 years. It might be longer than that. Where let's say we both pull guard at the same time, right? Our butts hit the ground at roughly the same time or the same time. You'll notice this happening because the ref will immediately make an obvious gesture to check their watch. And I'm not exactly sure the exact time. I think it's like 20 seconds or something like that, 25, something like 15, whatever it is. It's around that neighborhood. After that time lapses, both if there's no action, both competitors stood up, and there's a penalty for both, okay? And then we restart standing. Now, there are ways around this. If you double guard pull, and let's say we double guard pull, and I stand up, okay, I get an advantage. That's it. I don't get points. I get an advantage. If I go for a submission, so this is something that Michael Musumeci does very well, is he goes for a submission in order to avoid getting stood up. And then he goes for a footlock. And if he gets the footlock, great. He gets the footlock. If he doesn't, the other person defends and maybe stands up. And then now he's in the position that he wants. Guard. So, again, just the fact that I had to explain that to you, you can tell that, this is not spectator friendly, and we're black belts. Imagine somebody that doesn't train jiu-jitsu and you had to explain the double guard pull. Right. Rule. It's just impossible to follow. And then you're wondering, well, why did he get an advantage? Why did he get a penalty? Why is there 2 points for the scramble out of bounds? Oh, because there was a submission. There's just so many things that make it very, very hard for IBJJF points-based jiu-jitsu to make it into the next level, to be a spectator sport. Even no-gi. No-gi is more exciting than gi for the most part.
Because of the movement and everything.
Yeah, but the rules are so complicated that it's tough, So anyway, getting back to the metagame, other than wrestling, passing on the knees is making a comeback. Passing on the knees, making a comeback. Why? Leg locks and elevations. People are tired of getting spun under. They're tired of dealing with leg locks. They're tired of being elevated, so they just go to the knees. And you notice a lot of successful people now are passing from the knees, right? Body locks. Vinicius Gazzola, Trattor. This guy has crazy pressure from body locks. You notice at ADCC, a lot of the most successful people used body locks. JT Torres, they used body locks to get past the guard. Head and arm is making a comeback. Very few cases of loose passing now. When somebody is successful with a loose pass, like a heavy knee cut, like a very fast knee cut or a fast Toriando, it's usually they're just a more superior grappler. You don't really see that when two guys are of similar skill. You have to do something to kill the framing of the guy on the bottom when they're of equal skill. So that's why body locks, passing from the knees is making a comeback. and then the wrestling. These are kind of things I noticed that were probably going to be bigger and bigger parts of the jiu-jitsu game, especially with the way the rules are now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, and talking about the rules and the complexity of the rules, it kind of provides a good segue into going to these more recent hybrid type of events or showcase events, and which brings us to Quintet.
Yeah.
Explain the concept of Quintet, because I wouldn't say it's the first of its kind, because I believe things like this were done back in the early 2000s where it was team-based, but the floor is yours. Explain the concept of Quintet and this new era of competition.
Right. So Quintet started on or Quintet Ultra, which was the name of the event, was Thursday night. So that was the same night as the first day of the NoGi Worlds. Okay. I don't want to say they under marketed it, but there's some big name guys on this card, and I don't know why they had it on a Thursday either. It's kind of strange. But with the guys on this card, they should have made this, to me, a big thing. I hope it did well.
Well, I think one of the reasons, if I'm not mistaken, it took place in Vegas.
Yeah, so they didn't want to coincide with the UFC.
Yeah, because it was on UFC Fight Pass.
I understand that.
So
the thing is, I mean, I'll go through some of the bigger names on here, and you'll realize, like, wow, this is a big event.
Well, let's talk about the format of what Quintet is.
I got it. So Quintet is a 5-man, 5-on-5 team-based kind of like a competition where you have 5 people on each team. Okay, you choose the order in which your team members compete. Right, so whoever you pick goes first will face your opposing team's first team member.
Well, backing up a little bit, one key point is the teams there are no weight limits per se.
Oh, there is a weight limit. There is a weight limit that
it's a team limit.
Exactly, the team has a limit. So anyway, so the first person on each team faces off, and let's say you're team captain of one team and I'm team captain of the second team. Your first team member wins. That team member stays in and grapples the second team member of my team.
Well, yeah, in fact, but I think we're glossing over a little bit. So I don't know what the weight limit is, the team limit is.
I think it's 850.
Yeah, it's something like 850 pounds.
Yeah.
So each team
Yes.
could distribute that
Yes.
weight limit. So
Yes.
you could have either some gnat on your team,
Right.
like as a bantamweight 135er, but then you could have, a big 240 pounder, and then the matchups are based off of team strategies.
Exactly.
Of how they want to match up.
So for example, the first match of the Quintet was 2 guys that were relatively the same size. Sean O'Malley, who's current UFC fighter, and Takanori Gomi, who's like a Pride legend, fought in the UFC also. That's a pretty even matchup, right? And then the second matchup, it was Sean O'Malley guillotined Gomi, which was pretty impressive. And then he fights Hector Lombard, who is way bigger, and Hector Lombard got O'Malley in a straight ankle. So yes, there can be giant mismatches, and they made a rule change I thought was really good, and I think it was Eddie Bravo's suggestion, but where if there's more than, I think, a 40-pound weight difference, then the lighter competitor can choose if it's a 4-minute match or if it's an 8-minute match. That's a great rule, because some people will want to stall out that 4 minutes and just get that heavy guy out of there, and some people may want to take the additional time to win. And this is MMA fighters, so I can tell you right now that nobody chose the 4 minutes because there's a lot of ego there, and you don't want to be that guy, right? So I think even O'Malley may have taken the 8 minutes against Lombard. Doesn't matter. He ended up getting caught in an ankle lock. But yeah. So anyway, you face each other one by one. So if you win, you stay in, and if you lose, or it's draw, if it's draw, both guys are out. If you lose, you're out. The other guy stays in. And at the end, the last team standing, the team that still has competitors, is going to win. And if somehow everybody draws, then it's a judge's decision. And I believe they only judge the last match. So essentially, it's just a team-based strategic competition. And that's cool. That's a new thing. It's a new format. You get to see really freaky matchups that
submission only. Right?
Submission only. You must submit
outside of the judge's decision.
Yes, there is a judge's decision if it goes to the final person and there's nobody left. But yeah, it's submission only. So if I survive and you can't submit me, we're both out. So yeah. Let's talk about the super fights first in there. So there's 3 super fights, and part of this podcast is to kind of talk about the trends and how the coaching aspects and how grappling is evolving. So we don't need to recap every single match, but the super fight matches were important to me because they were all giant mismatches, to be honest. They were all finished very quickly. So the first one was Craig Jones, who is top tier, high level grappler, probably top 5 in his weight class at least, could be number 1, against Fredson Paixão, who's older guy, MMA fighter. And Craig pretty much just put it on Fredson. Took his back, used a very simple sweep to the mount, took his back, choked him.
And this kind of goes into the whole concept that Quintet is they've been flirting with all along, is pitting MMA fighters who have a pretty decent reputation for their grappling ability, pitting them against pure grapplers.
Yeah, it's not even close, by the way.
And this is kind of bringing that to light, right?
Oh, yeah. That's a huge... I mean, Craig Jones, no disrespect to Fredson. He put himself out. He's an MMA fighter. He's a legend in that world. But Craig Jones is in his prime. I would have given Craig 100 to 1 odds, to lose. There's no way he was going to lose in this one. It's just.
I mean, he is one of the top submission artists in the world right now.
This is not the most fair matchup because the age and all that stuff. So anyway, that was a mismatch, but it kind of highlights what we're about to get to next, which is similar, right? The next match was Danielle Kelly against Cynthia Calvillo. So I don't know too much about Danielle, but Cynthia Calvillo has had many fights in the UFC. She's tough. For a UFC grappler, she's pretty high level. I've never seen her lose a grappling match in the UFC. But she gets ankle locked, straight Achilles locked in, it was like 20, 30 seconds. So she obviously didn't have the knowledge of the leg game to deal with Danielle. So I mean, we're talking probably one of the best female grapplers in the UFC, losing against somebody who I don't know too much about, but I'm sure she's very, very high level, right? So quick finish, over. And then the last super fight was Gordon Ryan and Alexei Oleinik. Okay, I don't know how much you know about Alexei Oleinik, but this is the guy that Ezekiel chokes everybody.
Guy, yeah.
Yeah. Tricky guy. Again, in the beginning, I would say, maybe Alexei, some trick.
Yeah.
In hindsight, no way. I mean, Gordon went right into the cross-ashi and knee-barred Alexei so fast that Alexei didn't have anything for him. And this is, again, not the most fair match. Gordon is a young guy in his prime, the number 1 grappler, NoGi grappler in the world. Alexei Oleinik is a good grappler in the UFC. I would say probably one of the better, maybe one of the best
in the
UFC, in the heavyweight division.
And that's another thing. That's another layer.
Right. Now, I would like to see maybe Gordon versus Daniel Cormier. Okay, maybe now we're pitting, now we're getting somewhere. I think
you have an Olympic level grappler.
I think Gordon gets the choke easy, but again, or the leg lock easy, but I think that would be a little more exciting. Alexei's just too old, and he's not on the level. He's not on the level. So Gordon picks up the easy win. What I can tell you about these weird matches is just that the MMA guys and girls, they're just not on the level of the sport guys when it comes to pure grappling. Okay, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the team competition. But there was just no offense from any of the MMA people. They were spending their whole time defending and eventually got caught. And it is what it is. It's like, that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, right? That should be a normal occurrence. If I have to worry about 10 aspects of combat and the person I'm facing only has to worry about 3 of those aspects, that person, if we get into a competition in which only those 3 aspects are in play, that person that specializes is going to win, right? What does Gordon have to worry about? Wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and that, conditioning, maybe that's it. Alexi, Calvillo, Fredson, these MMA guys, they got to worry about wrestling, jiu-jitsu, striking, conditioning. They got fence work, they got clinch, all these things. You can't
at this stage of Gordon's career, where his primary focus is grappling on the highest level.
Can't beat this guy.
It's not really fair.
And he's a no-gi specialist.
Yeah,
and he's a no-gi specialist. He doesn't train the gi, so he doesn't have to worry about anything. How are you going to beat these guys unless you are also in that isolated environment, right? So, all right, let's get to the matches. Okay, so I'm going to separate real quick who I consider the high-level guys and the high-level wrestlers. And then everybody else kind of falls outside of this. And there's no disrespect to them. I just didn't see them as high-level as these people. Okay, first of all, Gilbert Burns is on another level than everybody else in the quintet. I mean, this is no surprise, right? Gilbert Burns. He's, UFC fighter, world champion,
in the gi.
In the gi. NoGi does super fights. He competes all the time. I'm pretty sure he was at ADCC. Can't remember at this point. But he's just a very high level guy. And so between him and Jake Shields, who's another competes in grappling all the time, very high level grappler, everybody else was pretty much a notch below them, to be honest. There was a couple MMA guys that really surprised me. And Gregor Gracie, another pure jiu-jitsu guy, very, very, very good on the ground. Those were all kind of like I would consider those pure grapplers that dabble in MMA, and they not dabble. I shouldn't say dabble. They train MMA, but they're primarily grapplers. They dabble with striking. The MMA guys that were very high level, Glover Teixeira seemed really high level at jiu-jitsu. Like there's no surprise this guy has all those arm triangle victories.
Yeah, I mean, I think people forget about his jiu-jitsu background. Yeah. He came from jiu-jitsu.
Right, I didn't know that.
Murderous punching power.
Yeah, I mean, Jake was a bit tired, but he put it on Jake Shields. Like, he put it on Jake Shields. I would love to see that match when both guys are fresh, because Jake had just fought like 3 times. It was extremely gassed.
Yeah, and then you have of course, you have the weight difference of the two as well.
Yeah, exactly. And the weight difference, yeah. So Glover was on. Like, I would have loved to see that guy fresh, yeah. But just didn't get a chance. James Krause, very high level, current UFC fighter, almost finished Gilbert Melendez. He was very high level. I was very impressed. I didn't know his jiu-jitsu was that good. I've honestly never heard of the guy in the grappling world. And other than that, there were some good performances by individual people. I thought O'Malley did real well. But for the most part, it was more of a everybody else was pretty, just not on the level of these guys, in my opinion. A couple guys I thought were very high level in the wrestling department was Chad Mendez. I mean, if you watch his match, his wrestling was insane. He fought Jay-Z Cavalcante, and Jay-Z is usually top guy. I never seen Jay-Z go to the bottom, and Chad's wrestling was so strong, Jay-Z forced to go to the bottom. Very, very strange. I didn't, I guess I don't quite understand MMA wrestling, how high level they are, but Chad, apparently, from what I saw and apparently from what people tell me, is incredible wrestler, like insane. King Mo, when he fought Anthony Johnson to a draw, he showed incredible wrestling. He was getting the better of Anthony, who's way bigger from the stand-up. That's no surprise. King Mo, I think, was an Olympian. Anthony Johnson was more of just like a collegiate wrestler, I think, at best. So those were the standouts, I would say, for the quintet. And in the end, the winner was Team UFC. So UFC won. Gilbert Burns won it for them. I believe Gilbert won the judges' decision at the very end. And then that was the whole thing. The second round wasn't the most exciting because every match went to a draw. Everybody just beat, just kind of eliminate each other, right? First round matches were a little more exciting. Not the second round match. The finals. The finals were a little bit dull, but it was just because they were more high level. And also, I should mention Anthony Smith had very high level jiu-jitsu too. I thought there's no surprise now that he submitted Gustafsson in the UFC with a rear naked choke. He's a legit black belt. He was another guy I thought legit. So yeah. All right. So what do we have to talk about this? Really MMA grappling is so different from NoGi sport jiu-jitsu. I mean, I'm sure you know that. Everybody probably knows that, but just this Quintet event really gave you a look into, what the differences are, right? So first off, most of the UFC guys play kind of like an anti-jiu-jitsu game. Very few of them want to engage with jiu-jitsu, right? And I'm talking about more of the UFC guys that don't come from a grappling background. So I'm not talking about Gilbert Burns. I'm not talking about Shields, Teixeira, Krause. These guys, they have a jiu-jitsu game. They're jiu-jitsu dominant in their game. People like Chad Mendez, people like Cub Swanson, these guys that were more known as UFC fighters that are like strikers or wrestlers, they don't really have much of an offensive jiu-jitsu game. Here's an example. Cub Swanson unfortunately had like a pretty terrible knee injury, like a blown out ACL and MCL from kind of not understanding how leg reaping works. Jake Shields got him in a just like a straight ankle lock, pretty much straight Achilles lock from a leg reap, and Cub just didn't turn. Didn't turn with the pressure. He went against the pressure, and so his knee popped. And Jake's a bigger guy. He's gonna come out on top on this, and that was the end of that match.
Well, that one's actually a little bit surprising because Cub Swanson is a black belt.
You know what? You're right. That was a weird one because Cub is a black belt. You're right, and he does know jiu-jitsu, but does he know the modern jiu-jitsu game?
There's the key word, the modern jiu-jitsu game, because if Ben, remember earlier this year you had the Prodigy. No, you had BJ Penn when he fought Ryan Hall, and he turned the wrong way as well in a very similar situation, right? So it's the.
So you have a guy who's has modern jiu-jitsu, Ryan Hall, caught BJ Penn. Yeah. Here we have the same situation. Jake Shield, modern jiu-jitsu guy. I mean, this guy trains. He does jiu-jitsu. He's not a MMA only guy versus Cub. MMA only guy. Probably doesn't really deal with leg locks that much.
Right. When Jake's not fighting, he's doing the Polaris events.
Exactly.
He's doing fight to wins.
Exactly.
Doing,
Trains with Danaher, trains with high level jiu-jitsu guys. So I think that missing element there is what caused that injury. But yeah, I mean, Cub is a jiu-jitsu guy, but again, he's more of an anti-jiu-jitsu guy than a counter jiu-jitsu guy. Rather than, like, when's the last time he had a submission or even attacked the back or attacked dominant grappling position? He's very rare. He's more of a boxer, stand in the
striker
pocket.
first style.
Exactly.
We'll just say that, a striker first style,
yes.
Whether or not he's a black belt.
Yes. So one of the reasons why we wanted to kind of recap these two events, so the NoGi Worlds and the Quintet, was because we wanted to kind of gather any similarities or differences. And I just think this is like about as polarizing as we can get as far as the sport grappling world, right? This is one show which is pretty much all about spectators, right? It's all about getting numbers, eyeballs, right? And they did a great job, the Quintet. It's all about showcasing big names over skill. Not to say that the skill isn't there, but
from a marketability
yes.
standpoint, commercial standpoint, sure.
I would tell you right now that the NoGi Worlds probably had higher level grappling. It just is for the most part. I mean, there's exceptions,
sure.
But for the most part, it's higher level in the NoGi Worlds. But I can tell you right now that the Quintet is 10 times more exciting to watch. You know, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, you know, because I wanted to see what was going to happen with, you know, Anthony Johnson and King Mo. You know, I was like, oh, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with Hector Lombard and, you know, Sean O'Malley? These are matches that they're like dream matchups you want to see.
They're compelling, yeah.
Yeah, and so
they're like video game matches.
Yeah.
Like,
so the IBJJF NoGi Worlds, they had high skill level, but not big names.
it's kind of a more of a clinical approach, or as you stated before we recorded, a regulation approach.
The Quintet was all about big names. Big names. I mean, they probably paid a lot of money to get some of these guys on here. I don't really know how they can afford some of these guys, to be honest. Some of these guys are top tier UFC fighters. Anthony Smith, you know, Gilbert Burns is up there. They got Gordon. He can't be cheap. Craig Jones can't be cheap. You know, like, I'm not sure how they funded this, right? I'm how many tickets they sold. Either way, it's just a more exciting event, and I think if we want grappling to grow as a whole, it's got to be more of these types of events. You know, the IBJJF NoGi Worlds and the IBJJF. You know, I know there's the SJJIF. There's a bunch of these federations, these federation type events. They're headed towards the Olympics. They're headed toward the opposite of spectator sport.
Clinical, regulatory,
yeah, where
regulation.
the athletes and the people involved in the sport support the sport, right? Whereas these guys, the Quintet, the Polaris, Kasai, the NoGi sub-only scene, EBI even, they're trying to cater toward getting all eyeballs on. I mean, we're in my gym right now. There's a trainer in my gym that there's no way he knows anything about the NoGi Worlds. But guess who he knows? Gordon Ryan. Guess who he knows? Nicky Rodriguez. He knows Gary Tonin. He knows these guys. How does he know these guys? Because they're great marketers.
And these are guys
exciting.
who have not won IBJJF titles, right?
Gordon has, but Gordon won the NoGi Worlds. But again, he's not known for IBJ. He's known for right. What? Being an Instagram guy and you know, being known as the NoGi GOAT. You know,
and at the same time is the top guy. I mean, outside of just the show, make no mistake about it that these shows don't just put on garbage because they don't have the traditional accolades of the past. It's like these are becoming the top guys in the game at the same time.
Yeah, they have kind of identified themselves as not only the top guys as far as skill, but the top guys as far as they bring eyeballs, they bring excitement to your event. So I think that's the future. I think these Quintet events are the future, and I think if the IBJJF wants to catch up with that, I think it's too late. It's not going to happen. They are going toward another direction.
Yeah, so imagine this. Imagine everything that's going on right now, and dare I say it, the IBJJF and the prestige that it holds actually becoming or serving as a feeder organization to some of these newer style events, right?
It's possible, yeah.
Because there's so much value to say this guy's an IBJJF champion. It's like, well, and everything that's involved with that title is that clinical. It's like they're peer reviewed.
Right.
They went to school. They graduated Harvard, you know, in the jiu-jitsu world. But then at the same time, you have these, you know, I guess like the Bill Gates of grappling, which Bill Gates was college dropout. But look at him.
Yeah.
He's, you know, so it's like we're kind of in this weird stage to where IBJJF, in a sense, could be a feeder organization now.
And it doesn't have to be, right? Look at how Gordon and the Danaher guys have made a name for themselves. They didn't do it through IBJJF. They never really won an IBJJF competition until they were already big names, right? Like Gordon didn't win the NoGi Worlds until he was already 80cc champion. You know, he then went on to win NoGi Worlds double gold. And he didn't build his name through the IBJJF. He built his name through self-promotion and through super fights and through calling people out and things like that. And yeah, I mean, that might be where the future of the sport is headed, right? Because, I mean, he's really one of the few athletes that is sponsored and I think gets paid very well to be sponsored. And he's probably very wealthy from his DVD sales as well. Right. So anyway, I think
So wrapping this up.
Yeah.
Wrapping this up. We named a lot of names. A lot of names have been mentioned in multiple events here in the discussion over the past weekend. Well, basically between Quintet and IBJJF. Who is your Muscle Farm Performance of the Week go to?
Muscle Farm Performance of the Week goes to Victor Hugo for his performance in the IBJJF Worlds. He got gold in the absolute, and he knee-barred Cyborg. I mean, he's the winner of the absolute black belt adult division. You got to give it to that guy, right? He made a name for himself. Knee-barred Cyborg, did a move that I thought was just incredible. You know, he played his A game, got the win. Look out for this guy. I think he's going to be a big star coming up. He's crazy athletic, long. You know, he just needs to work a little bit on his wrestling, and then he's going to be a big star.
And in doing so, may have ushered in a view of the new trend in submission grappling.
Yeah, I mean, essentially his game that he uses a lot is inverting underneath and hitting knee bars and footlocks underneath somebody. And that is a new trend in just jiu-jitsu in general. And that's why, like we said earlier, people are going to passing from the knees again. They don't want to deal with that. Victor Hugo, great job. For the Quintet, I'd have to say Gilbert Burns. You know, for that, I'll give him we'll just say he is the silver medalist for the performance.
Right.
So Gilbert Burns, incredible. You know, he was obviously a step above every single person in the Quintet team tournament, and other than probably Craig and Gordon, he's probably the highest level guy in that entire show. So great, crazy good performance from Gilbert Burns.
Well, there it is. Well, good episode, very very enlightening of great breakdown of the events over the past weekend. Anything else to add before we press stop on this record button?
No, just we didn't cover too many individual matches, and didn't cover too much of the results, because the results are all out there. You want to get the results, go to any site, right? Grappling Insider, it's all out there. Just do a IBJJF site has it. You can rewatch the Quintet and just see the individual results. But mainly, we want to get a big outlook on grappling as a whole. And so other than that, that's it. Thank you to Muscle Farm, sponsor to the show. Thank you to Jiu-Jitsu Magazine, obviously. And anything else, Jim?
No, that was very thorough. That was very good. I didn't get to see all the matches, but now I felt like I have.
You should.
Now I'm excited to go back and watch them now. All right, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, Jim.